Hello and welcome back to Building Microservices with Go. And in this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to continue with this refactoring theme. We're kind of just getting through that, I suppose, trudging chore of getting our code up to something that's respectable. And refactoring, as we mentioned in the last episode, is quite a normal part of software development. You kind of can't predict everything to be perfect every time. So it's fine to go back and do a little refactoring. So that's what we're doing. Any folks are kind of dying for that next installment on gRPC. It will be coming very, very soon. I just want to tidy all of this up. And rather than doing it off stream, I thought I'll do it on camera and folks can kind of see what's going on. And you know what? Feel free to absolutely skip these videos. But anyway, let's get going. So last time, what we started to do was we started to implement this getRate service. And this getRate service is going to fetch the exchange rates from the European Central Bank. And that central bank service returns XML. So we're parsing that and we're kind of creating our data structure. Now, there's kind of one thing that we want to add to that, because we're adding the exchange rates, okay? So the differences between currencies. Now, the European Central Bank, when it returns the rates, what it's actually doing is it's giving you a rate based on the euro. So, for example, the value that you get for the US dollar is the number of US dollars to the euro. So in terms of the number of euros that you get for the euro, well, it's 1. Now, we need to put that in there because of the way that we're going to kind of calculate the sort of the various different rates themselves as a ratio. And let's go do that first. So here, this is where we're kind of parsing all of that information. We're getting it all from there. We're getting all of the rates. So just before we return there, we are going to set the euros as a rate. So it's going to be e.rates, and rates takes a string. So we're going to set euro, and the value is going to be 1. So that's just nice and simple. So that's just so that we're adding euro as a rate into our exchange rate currency. So what's next? Well, we want to be able to get those rates. So as a kind of, when you're returning that, you know, I want to be able to query this service to get a rate. So let's just add a function. So function is going to be, call it E, exchange rates, and get rate. And what get rate is going to do is it's going to return you a ratio between two currencies. So we're going to be able to define the base currency, and that's going to be a string, and also the destination currency, and that's going to be a string. So this is going to return us a float and potentially an error. Okay, like that. Now, why am I setting this up? So I'm setting this up like this because what I potentially want to do is I want to call this and I want to say, hey, I want to get rate. I want the base rate to be the euro. And I want the destination base rate to be, let's say, US dollars. And in those instances, that's fine. That will give me, for example, when I find the right thing, a value of 1.0824. But what if I want to get the rate of, let's say, I don't know, the US dollar to, if my base price is US dollars and I want to get the value of British pounds, then what I can do there is I can just divide the kind of the destination rate by the base rate. So that will just give me my ratio between those two things. All right, nice and easy. So that's all we're going to do in this function. So first things first, I just need to check the rates for both currencies, because you may be passing in a string which doesn't exist. So let's just do that, and we can do, because it's a map, we can get the base rate. We're going to say OK, e.rates, because that's our map, the string, because map, our string, if you look here at our rates, it's a map. And that's going to return us the value as a float 64 and OK. Now, OK will either be true or false. If it'll be true if this map contains a value with the key of base. So if we're not OK, so if the rate doesn't exist, then what we're going to do is we're just going to return 0, and we're going to say format.errorf rate not found for currency base, like that. And that's going to give us our base rate. Now, we need to do the same thing for the destination. So we're going to call this dr, and I'm going to say if e.rates.dest, blah, 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 rate not found for currency and dest. So this is a really, really simple function. Now, then I'm just going to do a return dr over br and no error. So what that's going to do is that's going to return me a float 64. So as we kind of said earlier on, if the base rate is the euro, which all of these currencies are in, that's why we added that entry down here to the map of 1, because then our ratio is going to be, say, 1.08, which is the current rate for the dollar to the euro, over the euro, which is 1, and that's going to give you 108. So that'll give us a nice, consistent way of getting that ratio. And that's done. So what we can now do is we can look at the service that actually implements this. And I will put a link in that thing up there in case you've not seen this, but we started putting this unary endpoint together for gRPC. So unary endpoint is kind of a single one-way, it's kind of two ways, but request response standard approach for gRPC. And we called it getRate, and getRate returns a rate response, which just gives us a rate as float 32, and we didn't put anything in there. We had no implementation, and that was just to kind of get this thing going. So what we're going to do now is we're going to implement our new service. So inside of new service, we have our logger. What we also want to get in here is our rates, our data rates, rate service thing, the thing that has all of our rates. I'm going to call it R. So it's rates dot, and we call it exchange rates. Like that. And we're going to have a reference. So I'm going to store that reference here as well. And rates dot exchange rates. And we are pretty much good on that. Getting the request and the logger. Oh, package data. Got the wrong package. I only created it myself 2 seconds ago as well. Never mind. So data. And thank you for that, for putting the cursor right where the mouse should have been. Okay. So that's just setting up our currency. So now, rather than returning this non-existent rate here, what we're going to do is we're going to return get our proper rate. So what we're going to do first. So what we will do is we will call rates.getRate, and then we've got the base currency and the destination currency. So we can get that from the protocol rate request. So what we can say here is we can get this, let's just take a look. Okay, so rr dot, and then we've got base, and we can get base as a string. Now we're going to use get base dot string, okay? And that is going to return us the the value that we need. Now, we need to do the same thing for the destination as well. So we're going to get the base currency and we're going to get the destination currency. So all of this is pretty, pretty easy. Now, let's do that. Sorry. dot get base. Oops. Get destination dot string. Okay. So this returns us a float 64 and an error. So it's going to give us the actual rate and potentially an error if one of these doesn't exist. So we can just quickly do this. All right. So we're just going to say if error is not equal to nil, then return return nil and error. Just get rid of that for the time being. So now we've got our rate. It's a float 64, and we've got our rate response here, which is actually defined as a float 32. So let's just quickly go through and refactor this and change that. So if you remember when we were defining the kind of the protocol buffers, then you kind of define this protos file. Oh, sorry, that's the product. In this proto file, this is where you're defining your interface. So we have float here as a rate response. So if we look at the documentation for Proto 3, and we can look at the base types, somewhere in here it will be. There we go. You can see that we have float, and float is type float 32, the Go type float 32. We want float 64, so that's going to be the prototype of double. Let's just change that. Okay, so we've changed that now. So what we need to do though is we need to update this file here, which is code generated. So I can just run my make file, which is going to just call my proto-c command. And again, all of that stuff was in the first video on gRPC, so I'll put that link just there for anybody who hasn't seen that. But now, if we look at rate and rate response, it's now float 64, same as this value here. So I can just return rate. Okay. So that's kind of a little bit of a refactoring done there on my rate service. All we need to do now is create the instance of our rates and pass it into this, and that goes into the main.go. So I'm going to create it up here, rates, data.new. Wow, I can't remember what my memory. I must be getting old. Data.exchange rates. I'm definitely getting old, aren't I? I can't even remember what the method is. New rates. My word. New rates. What does new rates takes? Well, it takes a logger. So we can save that. All right. So new rates logger. That also gives us an error because if it can't create the rates, for example, if it doesn't hit the ECB, then we want to bounce that too. So if error is not equal to nil, then log dot error, something like that. And then we're just going to quit os.exit 1. Okay. So now in our new currency, we can now pass in the rates. Okay. So that's all good. So we can just run this and go run. Whoops. Main.go. And all of that is up and running. So we're all good there. So what is next? So the next thing we want to do now, we've refactored our currency service is we kind of want to go back and do a little bit of refactoring in the product API. And let me kind of show you a few areas where I think we need to clean this up. So the kind of the first thing is when we started to implement this, and if you look back to when we created this product API and implemented first the sort of the currency service, we started to put this stuff in here. So it was kind of getting inlined into here. So the product calls were kind of going there, and that was a little bit strange because what we were doing is we have this data object which actually gives us our products, which includes the price, but we're kind of mutating the price inside of our get handler. And I think the better place for that logic is actually inside the data class. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove all of these calls to the currency service, and we're going to put them into the data class. And let's have a look at how we're going to do that. So let's go over to that data class. So we have products.go. Oh, there we go. So products.go, when it was originally created, was really, 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 really simple. And it was just a bunch of functions. And that was kind of fine for a little while. But again, I think we sort of start to need to think about this now and start to, in some ways mature it. Because some of the things that I want to be able to do now is I want to be able to pass in an object, which is going to be my rates currency service. And I can't really do that if I don't have a constructor, because the object is just going to be kind of like dangling. And you can kind of look at some of the techniques and go, and you can use things like inits. It's not really a good thing to do. It's not a good practice. What I want to be able to do is I want to be able to kind of follow that constructor injection type approach, because when I get into testing, it's going to make my life really, really, really so much easier. So let's do that. Let's refactor all of this stuff into a type. And well, what am I going to call it? That's a pretty great question. Let's products DB, I suppose. So let's call it products DB. And it's a struct with an R. Not getting caught out with that one on this one. And we're going to have a number of different objects on this. So some of the things that we're going to have on here, we're going to have, well, we need our currency service, which we're going to get from our proto. So it's going to be currency. And I'm going to call this, protos dot currency client. Is it going to do the import correctly for me? Of course it's not. Let's go over here and do that. All right, there we go. So we've got our currency client, which has get rate, and that's going to be able to get the exchange rates from our currency service. And we are going to need, what else? Well, I think we can just get a logger for time being. So let's add that on there. So log, HC log, logger. So I'm going to go through, and I'm also going to replace out that sort of using the format.print line. I'm going to start using a structured logger. It's much, much better. The use of being able to have a structured logger is incredibly beneficial when it comes to sort of writing your code. A structured logger will give you data in a uniform format. It's going to make your life much, much easier. You're going to be able to do things like output in JSON, which is great if you want to ingest your logs into something like Loki from the Grafana folks, or you want to put it into Elasticache or pretty much any sort of anything really. It just makes it more parsable. So we're going to do that. And we're going to create a function, and it's going to be new products DB. So the types I'm going to pass in there is going to be protos.currency client. Currency client is an interface, which is why I'm not passing it by reference there. And also we want our logger, hclog.logger. And again, logger is an interface. And I'm going to return an instance of products DB there. So quite simply, this is pretty straightforward. I am just going to return a reference products DB with C and L. There's nothing much clever going on there. So now what I want to do is I want to kind of go through this and I want to kind of modify all of these calls like get products, and I want to modify those and make them methods now. So let's take this one first. So get products. So I'm just converting the standard function into a method by adding the objects on there. So it's going to be P and that is products DB. This it doesn't return anything kind of differently there, but what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to kind of query the product. So if we go back over to our, where is it? There we go. Our get service, then what we defined is the ability to kind of, where is it? Where is it? We're getting the rate from the, looking at the right file. I'm sure I am. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, there we go. Sorry. So we're getting the, oh, we're not doing that at all. That's interesting. All right. We're going to refactor that in a moment. What we're going to do is we're going to refactor this so that we can now have an optional parameter, which is going to be the exchange rate. So I'll be able to query my product in a number of different prices. At the moment, we're hard coding that to euros and British pounds. So let's do that. All right. So what I want to do in terms of get products is I want to be able to specify a destination currency. So we're always going to have our base currency of euros. So we're going to do currency string. So now what we can do is we can just say, well, if the currency is blank, because sometimes you just want things in the base currency of euro, then I'm just going to return the product list because it doesn't matter. I don't need to change anything. Oops, right, let me just add. There we go. But if it isn't blank, then what I need to do is I need to be able to get the currency rate. And I'm going to get that from the service. So let's have a look at how I can do this. So what I do is I'm going to call p dot, and it is, come on, where are you? Currency dot get rate. And get rate is going to have, if you remember, exactly this signature here. So we define a rate request, context.background. So we can literally just copy that code. And I'm going to get rid of that in a moment. And protos.rate request, currency, get rate. Save that up. Okay. And let's have a look here. So if we're not getting the new rate, we want to return something. And what do we want to return? Well, we should return an error. So let's refactor that. So we're going to return nil, blank collection, and we're going to return the error there. So this was kind of the previous way that we were looking at it when we were building this out, and we weren't using this structure logger. So I was having to kind of put these error things in and stuff there to be able to parse that out. It's just, I mean, it works if I want to use the standard package, but it's just not very flexible. So when I'm using my new logger, and I can just do error, and that's going to automatically sort of sort things out. And it just means I can write something, so I can say unable to get rate. And we're going to say for currency, and we're going to pass the error. And not like that, we're not going to do it properly. Okay. So then we've now got our rate there, and rate isn't currently being used. So what we need to do is we need to manipulate all of the prices in our product list and return the correct rate. So what's it going to be? We're going to do well 4, and it's going to be P in range product list, and that's going to allow us to iterate over those products, and we're going to create ourselves a new product list. So it's going to be well, I can't remember what to call it. I think I'll just call it PR. Have I got a PR? PR, which is product return or something along those lines. And that is going to be product, like that. So then what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over all that stuff. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to append from our original product. So we're going to do PR equals gosh, my brain. We're going to do PR equals P, and that is going to give us a reference there. So let's think about that. So what that is actually going to give us is that's going to return the reference. So if we mutate the value of that reference, then that's not what we want, because it's going to underline, it's going to change everything on the kind of the underlying setup there. So what we need to do is create a copy of it. So I'm going to call it NP, which is a new product. And then I can use the D reference like that, and I can copy, so I can copy P. So NP now is a copy of P. So what I can now do is I can do NP dot price, and I can manipulate the price. So I'm going to say NP dot price equals NP dot price times my resp dot rate. So that's going to give me my rate, and it's kind of complaining there because I'm saying I've got float 32 and a float 64. So let me just update the data type there and change that to a float 64, not float 65. All right. So now we've got our product. Oops. And then what we can do is we can append it. So we're going to do append PR NP. And we need to take a reference to that. So that now we're just adding to that. We've copied that collection. We're just kind of adding it. We're manipulating it. And then we're going to return nil. Okay. So this is kind of slowly getting there. We've refactored out this method now. We've refactored out get product. It's getting a little bit cleaner. So the next thing we need to do is we need to kind of go through and we need to refactor out all of these other elements as well. So let's quickly go through and do that. So get product by ID. This is going to get a singular product. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do P products, DB, get product by ID, and then we're going to get the product, we're going to return it, and blah, blah, blah. But again, we need to get the rate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a helper function, because this code here is going to end up duplicated. So what I want is a little helper function for fetching the rate. The other thing is, well, that's still hard coded, so just as well I spotted that. So I like to put helper functions, things like that, down at the kind of the bottom of my class. Of my object. It doesn't really matter. I think the kind of the general rule of thumb is you want to try and keep them as close to the methods where they're being used as you can. But I like all my public stuff to kind of be, up the top. It's where the sort of the entry point for the interface is probably where I'm going to start whenever I'm having any issues. So I'm going to add that function here, and I need to make it a method, because I need a reference to my currency service. So it's going to be, can't remember what I called it again. Wow, memory. Product DB, P, products DB, and this is get rate. It's a string for the destination rate, and it returns a float 64 and an error. Right, nice and easy. So then what we can do is we are just going to copy all of this stuff here. And I'm just going to paste that into there. So blah, 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 if blah, when am I going to do? If there's an error, we know what, actually, we can just return straight away resp dot rate, which is a float 64 and an error, because if that error is blank, it doesn't matter. If it isn't, well, we want to do about it. We are always going to be using euro as our base rate, so I can just specify the destination there. So let's go back up here to our service. Where were we? All right, here. So we're going to do get rates. We're going to do p dot get rate and currency rate error, and then we can refactor that. Okay, nice and easy. Right, so back down to here. So again, if we don't find the product, we're just going to return error product not found. Then what we want to do is get the rate. So we're going to just manipulate this signature here, because we want the ID and we want the currency that we want to fetch back. So then we can say that, well, if currency equals, if it's blank, then just return nil and the object that we returned there. Wrong way around. Sorry, my bad. Okay. And then what I want to do, what's it complaining about? Okay. Oh, because I is the product ID. So, all right. Let's just grabs me the index. Okay. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the rate, and I'm going to fetch that rate. And what I want to do is, again, I need to take a copy. And the reason that I need to take a copy is because product list has a references. Now, if I grab product list and mutate the rate on it, I'm going to be mutating the actual collection item. I don't want to do that. I want to return a specific. So why I'm using that star? Okay, so my new product equals star product list. Oops. And thank you for auto-completing that I don't want it auto-complete. So what's going on in this line? NP is defining a new variable. And I'm automatically assigning it product list of index I. So that's going to return me a product object with the given index. Now product is a reference. So by using the star here, sorry, my bad. By using the star here, what I'm doing is dereferencing it. So I'm in effect, I'm taking a copy of this very simple struct, and I can do that. I can get away with it because it's not a deep object. It's just very, very flat. So I'm doing that. But then what I'm going to do is I can safely manipulate the price. So NP, oops, price equals rate, and then return NP. So there's a couple of little updates there. We've updated and we've refactored get products to be able to now have this optional currency, and we've refactored the get product by ID to do the same thing. So update product, well, when we don't update it based on a currency. I mean, potentially we could take, but we're gonna make an assumption that all of our updates are already in the base currency of euros. So I can just change this into a product, a method, and I'm going to do the same there. So that's it for this episode. So what we've seen is how we can kind of start to go through and refactor out our code. Where we've been going through and we've been tidying up a few things. We've made some modifications to our currency service, but also kind of looking at a better way to implement the data components for our products API. In the next episode, we're going to see the final part of this refactoring, and we're going to see how we can start to just modify those RESTful endpoints. But until then, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.